Before the hood, before the mask, before the empire, there was always a man underneath. That's the story most cartoons buried. The story they kept from you about Forbidden Planet is the one that explains everything that came after it. Every starship crew, every helpful robot, every ancient civilization that destroyed itself at the height of its own power. One film, 1956. It invented the entire toolkit, and almost nobody under 50 knows exactly how far the blueprint goes. The blueprint goes further than you think. The Shakespeare adaptation hidden in plain sight. The robot that cost 25 years of an average salary to build. The electronic score assembled from circuits that burned themselves out mid-session. And the single psychological concept that rewired horror, science fiction, and thriller filmmaking for the next 7 decades. If vintage sci-fi history, the stories behind the screen, not just the screen itself, is your thing, subscribing means you get the next one the day it drops, not 6 months later when the algorithm decides you're ready for it.
What is it, Randall? Sir, radar just picked up something.
10. The first time Hollywood left Earth for good. Here's a fact that will quietly rearrange how you think about every space movie you've ever loved. Before 1956, Hollywood kept one foot on the ground, literally. Forbidden Planet holds the distinction of being the very first major motion picture set entirely on another world, with 0 scenes taking place on Earth. No headquarters, no generals in a war room back in Washington, no worried families watching the news. Just the planet Altair 4, its strange alien skies, and whatever secrets were buried beneath its surface. The entire story unfolded 60 trillion miles from home, and audiences had never experienced anything like it. Think about what that meant for a guy sitting in a theater in 1956. You bought your popcorn, you found your seat, and for the next hour and 48 minutes, Earth simply ceased to exist. The filmmakers trusted the audience enough to strand them on another planet and not provide a safety rope back to familiar ground. That was a radical act of storytelling confidence. Every space epic that followed, every film that dropped you cold onto a distant world and dared you to keep up, owes that creative courage to this movie.
What? It just stopped at the foot of the pass.
9. Shakespeare called. He wants his plot back. Most people who've seen Forbidden Planet have no idea they were watching a Shakespeare adaptation. That's either a brilliant disguise or the greatest bait and switch in Hollywood history. The film is a direct science fiction reimagining of William Shakespeare's The Tempest, transplanted 4 centuries forward and about 40 light-years sideways. Dr. Morbius maps almost perfectly onto Prospero, the brilliant, isolated sorcerer ruling his private island. His daughter Altyra mirrors Miranda, the sheltered young woman who has never seen the outside world. Commander Adams fills the role of Ferdinand, the newcomer who captures her heart. And Robbie the robot? He carries echoes of both Ariel and Caliban simultaneously, a loyal servant with hidden depths. What makes this remarkable is how seamlessly the translation works. You don't need a single footnote of Shakespeare to follow the story, but once you see the parallels, you can never unsee them. The bard's core tension, isolation, intellectual ambition, the corrupting nature of unchecked power, transfers to deep space without losing a single beat. It makes you wonder how many English lit professors assigned The Tempest to students who had already understood every major theme from a Saturday afternoon matinee.
Automatic control.
8. The civilization that outsmarted itself into oblivion. The Krell were the most advanced species in the galaxy. Past tense is doing a lot of work in that sentence. The ancient Krell civilization that once inhabited Altair 4 had achieved technological miracles beyond anything human science could imagine. Their crowning achievement was a machine of incomprehensible scale, a device capable of converting pure thought directly into physical reality. Whatever the Krell mind could conceive, the machine would instantly build. It was the ultimate expression of intelligence over matter, and it killed every last one of them in a single night. The machine had one catastrophic design flaw. It didn't filter. It amplified everything the mind produced, including the dark, primitive, irrational impulses buried in the subconscious that civilized beings spend their whole lives suppressing. The Krell's own hidden fears and ancient animal rage came roaring out of that machine with the full force of their superior technology behind it, and their civilization tore itself apart. The lesson the film is quietly delivering is genuinely chilling. Intelligence without self-awareness isn't an upgrade. It's a faster route to the same old catastrophe. That's not a 1956 idea. That's a permanently relevant idea. Consider it the ultimate cautionary tale about reading the terms and conditions before you hit install. 7. The villain was inside the house the whole time. Most monster movies give you something to look at. Forbidden Planet gave you something to think about. That was the switch. The film's central threat, the terrifying force killing crew members one by one, is eventually revealed to be a physical manifestation of Dr. Morbius's own subconscious mind, projected into reality by the very same Krell technology that destroyed its creators. Morbius's darker impulses, his jealousy, his territorial rage, his desperate need to protect what he'd claimed as his own. The machine read all of it and built a monster out of it. The id, as Freud would call it, the beast beneath the civilized surface. What made this genuinely revolutionary in 1956 was the psychological sophistication of it. This wasn't a creature from another planet. This wasn't radiation gone wrong. The monster was a brilliant, respected scientist's own repressed humanity, wearing a shape made of pure destructive force. The antagonist and the victim were the same person. Hollywood had never put that concept on screen before, and it made the story tragic in a way that pure creature features never could be. Morbius wasn't a villain, he was a warning, and that warning lands differently once you understand what the Krell machine was actually built to do.
Just some kind of big outline in the disintegrator beam.
6. The monster you almost got to see. The id monster that audiences eventually experienced, an invisible, crackling energy outline, terrifyingly suggested but never fully shown, was actually a compromise. And the compromise turned out to be the genius. Director Fred M. Wilcox originally envisioned a fully visible, tangible creature with a physical form that audiences could see in detail. The early concept leaned towards something more explicitly monstrous, a design that would have been expensive to animate and potentially alarming enough to trigger serious pushback from the censorship bodies reviewing the film. Budget concerns and content concerns arrived at the same conclusion from different directions: pull back. The result was something far more effective than any rubber suit could have managed. By keeping the monster invisible except for the glowing energy outline traced by defensive screens, and one crucial close-up of its roaring face in an animated sequence, the filmmakers handed every viewer in every theater the most powerful special effects engine ever built: their own imagination. What you couldn't fully see was infinitely scarier than what you could. Horror directors have been chasing that logic ever since, and most of them know exactly where they first learned it.
Monsters, John.
5. The soundtrack that literally blew itself up. Here is a production story so strange that if you pitched it today, the studio would send you home. The entire musical score of Forbidden Planet was performed by circuits that occasionally destroyed themselves during recording. Composers Lewis and B.B. Barron created the film's completely electronic soundscape using handmade circuits of their own design. No orchestra, no conventional instruments of any kind. This was the first entirely electronic film score in Hollywood history, and the Barrons built their tools from scratch, because nothing off the shelf could produce what they were hearing in their heads. Some of those homemade circuits pushed past their design limits in pursuit of a specific sound, reportedly burned out mid-session, creating genuinely unpredictable audio events that ended up in the final cut. The Musicians Union refused to classify what the Barrons did as music, which is why the film credits it as electronic tonalities rather than a score. That bureaucratic snub didn't stop the soundtrack from landing on the National Recording Registry decades later as a culturally significant work. The sounds you hear in that film, the alien hums, the oscillating drones, the electronic shrieks, came from components that were, in a very literal sense, giving their lives for their art.
Dead.
He was warned, and now he's paid.
4. The price of the most famous robot in Hollywood. Before we talk about what Robbie the Robot did, let's talk about what Robbie the Robot cost, because the number stops people cold even today. Building Robbie required an investment of approximately $125,000 in 1956 dollars. To frame that, the median American household income that year was around $4,800. Robbie cost the equivalent of more than 25 years of average wages. He was, at the time of his construction, the single most expensive prop ever built for a Hollywood production, a record that stood for years. MGM made that investment because they understood, or perhaps just gambled, that a robot character with genuine personality, articulate speech, and a visually iconic design could carry weight the story needed. They were right, and then some. The engineering involved building articulated arms, a rotating dome, illuminated panels, and a complete interior mechanism that allowed the actor inside to operate the character convincingly. Nothing remotely like him had ever walked across a film set before. 25 years of wages to build a prop. That's either visionary spending or the most expensive costume in history. Probably both.
You wanted me Robbie to make a choice.
3. Robbie goes from prop to phenomenon. Here's where the $125,000 gamble pays off in ways nobody could have predicted. Robbie the robot didn't just appear in Forbidden Planet. He became Hollywood's first genuine robot celebrity. Following the film's release, Robbie appeared in The Invisible Boy just 1 year later, essentially receiving his own starring vehicle. He went on to guest appearances in television series across the following decades, showing up in The Twilight Zone, Lost in Space, Mork and Mindy, and numerous others. He attended conventions, appeared in advertisements, and accumulated a pop culture footprint that outlasted most of the human stars he'd worked alongside. What audiences responded to wasn't the mechanics. It was the personality. Robbie spoke in full sentences. He had opinions. He had a dry, careful quality that felt somehow trustworthy. He followed his programming but seemed, in some hard-to-define way, to understand what he was doing. That quality, the helpful, articulate, slightly formal robot companion, became one of sci-fi's most durable character types. Think about that design the next time a certain Golden Protocol droid walks into frame. The family resemblance isn't accidental.
She mustn't do this. She must be prevented.
2. The outfit that almost didn't make it past the censors. Now we arrive at the fact that made studio executives sweat through their suits in 1956, and it involves hemlines. Specifically, hemlines that were approximately a decade ahead of their time. Altera's costumes, designed to suggest an alien upbringing completely free of Earth's social conditioning about modesty and clothing, pushed hard against the Hays Code, Hollywood's self-imposed content regulation system. Her outfits were deemed too revealing by the censors reviewing the production, and adjustments were required before the film could receive approval for release. The negotiations apparently involved some spirited back and forth between the studio and the censorship board over exactly how much fabric constituted decency in the year 2200. Anne Francis wore those costumes with a quality that transcended the controversy, a genuine, unself-conscious warmth that made Altera feel like a real person rather than a wardrobe showcase. The character became an icon, the sheltered, intelligent, quietly powerful young woman discovering the wider world on her own terms. Her silhouette, that shimmering, minimal, alien fabric look, influenced science fiction costume design for generations of films and television that followed. When you see any subsequent sci-fi heroine in sleek, minimalist, forward-thinking wardrobe choices, you're seeing Altera's influence still moving through the culture. The censors tried to bury it. Fashion history wouldn't allow that.
It's an obsolete term.
1. The blueprint for everything you've ever loved. This is the one. Set everything else aside, because this is the fact that rewires how you look at the last 70 years of science fiction. Forbidden Planet is widely and specifically credited by film historians, creators, and scholars as the single movie that established the foundational vocabulary of modern sci-fi storytelling. Faster-than-light travel as a casual operational reality, established here. A starship crew operating under military-style command structure, established here. An advanced alien civilization that rose to impossible heights and then vanished under mysterious and terrible circumstances, established here. The concept of a sentient, helpful, articulate robot as a genuine character rather than a prop. You already know that answer. Gene Roddenberry has acknowledged the film's influence on Star Trek, directly and indirectly through interviews over the years. The C-57D's crew dynamics, the exploratory mission premise, the balance between wonder and danger in deep space. The Enterprise is flying in the wake of a ship that launched a decade earlier. This movie didn't just tell one good story. It handed every science fiction writer, director, and showrunner who came after it a complete working toolkit. And most of them used it without even realizing where the tools originally came from. One film from 1956. Everything you love about the genre. Follow the blueprint back far enough and it leads here every single time.
But I'm immune, like both my parents.
That's what he says. I don't believe it. Nothing could be immune to that thing.
Darling.
Bonus. The icon before icons were a thing. Before we close the file on Altair 4, here is one final piece of evidence for how far ahead of its time this film was operating. Anne Francis's portrayal of Altera didn't just capture audiences in 1956. It created a template for the science fiction heroine that cinema and television would spend the next several decades trying to replicate. Her miniskirts and alien fabric wardrobe weren't just controversial, they were genuinely revolutionary in the context of what Hollywood was willing to put on screen. The look arrived roughly 10 years before the 1960s made that aesthetic mainstream. Altera was curious, warm, capable of genuine emotion, and entirely unimpressed by social conventions she'd never been taught. She wasn't a damsel, she wasn't decoration. She was the emotional anchor of the entire story. The human proof that the Krell's tragedy mattered. That connection was worth preserving against the destructive power of unchecked intellect. Generations of cinematic heroines stand in her footsteps. Many of their designers knew it. Some of them were just watching an old movie on late-night television and felt something click into place without quite knowing why. That's the quietest kind of influence, and it's often the most powerful kind. One film, released in 1956. It left Earth entirely, staged Shakespeare in deep space, built Hollywood's first robot superstar, accidentally invented the modern sci-fi soundtrack by burning out its own equipment, and handed the entire genre a rulebook it's still using today. Forbidden Planet didn't just hold up. It turns out it was always ahead of where we were standing. Which one of these actually got you? The Shakespeare connection you never saw coming? Robbie's price tag? The self-destructing circuits? The invisible monster that turned out to be the hero's own mind? Drop it in the comments. The conversation down there is usually better than the video.